Hello and welcome to this episode of the Property Forum Chat Show. We've got some great things in store for you today around the kind of tax, Section 24, whether to buy in a limited company, personal names, succession planning, wealth creation. Don't let property tax ruin you. That is the topic for today's episode. I'm joined by a special guest today, which is Tony Gimple. Tony Gimple is the ex-founding director of Less Tax for Landlords. He can be contacted at tonygimple.com. He's an experienced presenter, commentator, and expert in tax and all estate planning kind of topics. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion today, going through all these kind of topics. And we're going to go to you guys for a lot of questions. So welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi Nick, it's good to be here. It's always interesting doing these kind of things, a bit on the fly. Whether the technology stands the test of time, we'll see.
Absolutely. I've got you a little bit crackly coming through now, but let's see what happens. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. We shall see. Let's crack on and hope that the tech doesn't let us down. This kind of tech, live streaming, modern technology is all a bit of a challenge, but in this new area, we're learning all about it in lockdown. So let's see how it goes, hey?
Okay, let's get on.
So essentially, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself first as well, just for those of you that don't know me or haven't come across me before. My name is Nicholas Wallwork. I'm the CEO of Property Forum. I'm an international For Dummies author. I've got Brexit for Dummies out there for all my sins, which is an interesting book if you want to get to sleep quickly, and Investing in International Real Estate for Dummies, which covers all the kind of property investment strategies out there. So very, very good book if you're looking to get into property or looking to grow your portfolio. Head off to propertyforum.com. It's the world's largest international property chat forum, and we can ask your questions there if it's not covered in today's show. So as I was saying earlier, we're going to be covering kind of Section 24 discussions around that, whether to buy in a company name or personal names, limited company name or personal names, the potential for tax rises post-COVID-19 is maybe a topic we'll be chatting about, Tony. And also why you should consider succession planning and estate planning now. And then we'll get on to those kind of all-important questions and answers. So for now, Tony, I guess one of my first questions is around Section 24. Can you just give us a brief overview of what Section 24 is, please, and how it's likely to affect people in the coming months and years in their portfolios or indeed getting started? Just give us an overview of that particular tax problem.
Section 24 isn't a problem if you're a basic rate taxpayer. Anybody who's in the buy-to-let market, private rental sector, they'll only be able to get a tax credit at basic rate for their interest payments on their buy-to-let mortgages. Whether it's from their own home or anywhere else, they're effectively capped at basic rate relief, which is going to be a problem if you're starting to get into higher rate or advanced rate taxes. It's very possible, depending on your gearing, to end up making a loss simply because of Section 24.
So it's a pretty challenging tax, especially if you've got a lot of properties that you've built up over the years in your personal names.
Yeah.
What are the kind of challenges, I guess, for landlords now? I see it all over the forums, on our forum, on all the Facebook groups, people sort of saying, oh, should I incorporate? Should I sell my portfolio? What are the kind of the challenges for people that have already got properties in their personal names? What would you sort of suggest they do overall?
Okay, look, it's really difficult to come up with a one-size-fits-all answer.
Agreed.
The key is to understand why you got into property in the first place, what you're really trying to achieve from it. Do you want to pass it on to the next generation? Are you looking to work with local authorities? Are you going to go into buy to rent? For some people, if they're trading in property, property developers, if they're running serviced accommodation, effectively hotels, then perhaps the limited company route is the way to go. If, however, you're running a traditional buy-to-let portfolio in your own names, then perhaps you need to consider keeping it in your own name, but looking at things called mixed partnerships, which is a very good way of offsetting Section 24.
Yep.
You don't have to remortgage, you don't have to get Section 162 incorporation relief, don't have to worry that HMRC take things as read, and just can't be bothered to check what's going on behind the scenes with incorporation and directors' loan accounts and so forth. So there is no right answer, but the key is understand where you are, make sure you've got proactive advisors who are themselves in the space and understand what it means to run the portfolio as a professional property business. One thing to bear in mind though, you only pay tax if you make a profit. And if you're not making a profit, why are you in the business in the first place? And paying tax does keep the lights on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're not making a profit, you've not got a huge amount to worry about. And
you've got other problems.
Yeah, you've got other problems anyway. It does hurt you though. If you've got, if you're being taxed on revenue more so than profit in the first place, you could have been making a profit before, but now you're not going to be, of course. So it can impact those kind of investors.
I've seen lots of people, who are considering of selling up and getting into a death spiral of capital gains tax and so on, simply because of Section 24. Because as you rightly say, de facto, you're now taxed on turnover and not profit.
Yeah, it's madness, isn't it? Just as a quick, because we're early on in the webinar podcast, I'd like to just ask everyone that's on to ask some questions. I mean, this is an interactive session as well. I'm going to select some of the pre-selected questions, and thank you for those that have registered. But ultimately, anyone that's on now watching live, whether you're watching on our Facebook pages, whether you're watching on our Facebook group, on the Property Forum TV YouTube channel, there is a chat facility and comment facility. Please do comment and chat in there. I'll be able to pull those up on my screen, show them up on the screen, and get your questions answered as we go along, or at the end, if we haven't covered them, some of the pre-selected questions, we'll certainly be prioritising anyone that's in the chat. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Property Forum TV, if you haven't already. Then you can log in and post questions there. Again, if you're on the Facebook pages, watching it from there, log in, ask questions. It's all about answering your questions as best we can. We've had an unprecedented amount of pre-registered questions about this. It's obviously a hot topic, people wondering what to do. Thank you, Dr. Chong, for already asking 3 questions in the app here. I'll go to one of those to show that we're listening. We are listening to your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer those. These have come from YouTube. I see you're on YouTube, Dr. Chong. Thank you very much. Ask as many questions as you want. Anyone else, please jump on, ask questions as we go throughout, and I'll try and come back to as many of them as I can, and we'll get loads of those answered. So, Tony, I've got one here from Dr. Chong. He says, what's the difference between a hybrid and an LLP structure? Obviously we're sort of talking generally here, of course, but could you give us a bit of an overview on that, please?
A limited liability partnership is a hybrid in its own right. It's a combination of natural persons, in this case, what you might otherwise call partners, who are members of a limited liability partnership. So you're still taxed as an individual, but the LLP has all the advantages of a limited company, limited liability, and so forth. A hybrid in the sense of owning buy-to-let properties, it's a combination of you as the natural person, as the designated member of a limited liability partnership, and your limited company also as a designated member. So there's 3 of us in this relationship, as they say. Me, myself, and
kinky.
Whatever floats your boat, Nick.
Didn't say it floated my boat.
Yeah. So it's really just a question of a bit of jargon. But the LLP and hybrid are effectively the same thing.
Effectively a similar thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. Thank you for Manura Shah, he's just posted a question. Let's jump onto that straight away. I want to show that we're here to help, guys. So Manush is, Munesh, sorry, is that right, Munesh? I'm not sure, apologies if I've got that wrong. He says, we're considering our first resi property for buy-to-let. Should I buy it in my own name or sole trading company, as he has a sole trading company for other purposes? I'm not sure what he means by that. Sole trading company, is that a limited company? Manesh, can you let us know if that's a limited company? If it's a sole trading entity, that's your personal name. So that's essentially buying your personal name. But let's answer this question, Tony. Should he be buying it in his sole trading name, personal name, or a limited company as a first buy to let? What do you think? I've got some opinions on that, but I'll let you go first.
It really depends what his plans are going forward. Is he already a higher rate or advanced rate taxpayer? Is it going to be expansion? And in terms of the mortgage, generally speaking, it's better to get the mortgages in your personal name because you've got all the consumer protection. You've got higher, potentially higher loan to value still. Doing it through a limited company, you don't run away from the liability, because there will be personal guarantees, on that property and on you, particularly if you're starting out. But so much depends on the individual, whether married, single, kids, ages, tax rate, how much they're going to borrow, and so on. But interest only, though, regardless, will probably be the best bet for buy-to-let properties, because the more you buy on repayment, the less you'll be able to borrow in due course.
He's actually just, Manoush has just posted back in, he's registered self-employed with HMRC. So personal name, limited company, exactly. Like you say, I think it's, we want to try and give as much value here and let people see the benefits of each. And, we can talk about certain scenarios. Obviously, those are not a blanket answer, are they, Tony? I mean, it's very critical we state on this that we're not giving out tax or accounting advice on this webinar. That's key. It's important that this is a kind of a, maybe just getting it on your radar as an option. You then need to go and do your own due diligence and, go and instruct Tony or his tax firm or his contacts to go and get that correct advice. That's critical. What we do in Red Brick, our development agency, we essentially have a group structure. We've got a large number of properties already. We're growing the portfolio extensively. We work with private investors also to do that, so we lend money from private investors. If you are interested in a completely hands-off investment, by the way, please do reach out to me after the webinar, and we give an excellent double-digit rate of return, and we go and do all the hard work and do the developments for you. But because we have that structure, we have like a 3-tier structure. It's actually a 4-tier structure where we have our own private companies with our wives on. There's some tax planning there at the top. We have our group company in the middle where we take our private lending. And then we have an SPV for every single site or property below. Some of the benefits of that are reinvestment benefits. Obviously, we'll only get the corporation tax if we sold a property at the SPV level. That can flow back up and get reinvested very tax efficiently. So that's only going to be at, 19% at the moment, Tony? What's the current?
That's right, yeah.
19% corporation tax rate. So that's, that's a great rate. So we're kind of reinvestment there. So again, if you're reinvesting and growing, the corporate structure can be really, really powerful. Obviously, all the added legal protections as well. If an incoming buyer wants to buy the SPV rather than the property direct in the SPV, they'll only be paying 0.5% stamp duty on the shares of that purchase of the SPV.
Yep.
So
in company, not the property within it.
Yeah, not the property within it. If you buy the property within it, you're whacked with all the extra stamp duty rates and the extra 3% surcharge and all the rest. So, it can be a very good route if you are even selling off properties of a correct size, because the incoming buyer doesn't have to pay the stamp. Ultimately, that can mean you possibly can charge more for the property because they're not paying the stamp. So if they're used to paying the stamp on a comparable property, they might be prepared to pay a little bit more for yours, for that benefit. You might be able to meet them halfway on the stamp saving, for example. I've got a question come in, Tony, from Facebook from Helen Akangba. That's a tricky name.
Oh, you're terrible.
Helen Akangba. Let's call her Helen. That's easier, isn't it? Hi, Helen. Thank you for joining us and asking questions. And thank you to people on Facebook. Jump in wherever you're watching. Please ask questions. This webinar is for you guys. We are here to help. So Helen asks, is it easier to buy multiple buy-to-lets as a company than an individual? So I guess buying multiple at the same time. If you're buying a portfolio. I don't think it makes any difference, does it really?
It's all going to depend on your circumstances, the availability of credit, why you want to go down either route. Buying through companies does have some advantages. Buying in your own name also has advantages. But the key factor here is, what is your end goal? Is it just you? Do you intend to bring other people in as shareholders, directors? Are your children in their majority, so they can become shareholders? So again, without pouring into the pit of detail, it's going to boil down to your circumstances. I know it sounds very bland, and I'm probably going to say this many times throughout the podcast, but there is no in the round answer. Each has its advantages, each has its disadvantages.
Absolutely. And as we go through the webinar, let's try and cover as many of those advantages and disadvantages for certain scenarios as we can, without giving specific advice. Obviously, that's critical. Let's go on. I mean, what's great is a lot of the pre-submitted questions people are asking now online. So thank you for that. Keep whacking them in the chat. Then I can bring them up on screen, of course. We got Craig D here who's having a whinge. Not wishing to undermine your event, but do you agree that people asking specific questions about tax should pay for advice on their individual circumstances? Yeah, we absolutely agree with that. I think that's exactly what we're saying, Craig. We're saying we'll give you some blanket advice. We're going to give you some scenario-based answers. We're discussing the relevant legislation in the round. But yeah, absolutely, people should be paying for the advice. The idea of these seminars is to, try and get certain topics on your radar. Certain situations might resonate with you and go, that sounds a bit like me. I want to reinvest, I want to grow. So that could be an option for me. We're certainly not saying go and implement that option for 1 second. It's very much about going and getting the right advice and paying for it, getting that set up correctly. Because there's lots of nuances here, isn't there, Tony? Like, the share ownerships, different share classes, different voting rights, et cetera, et cetera. It can get quite complex, whether you're a director or not at certain companies, but you're a shareholder, and the detail, the devil's in the detail. SIC codes, the lot.
Oh, look, that can have all sorts of unwanted consequences. If you don't get the SIC codes right, and they are relatively easy to change, I think the bottom line it's yes, at some point you're going to need to pay for advice, but the only thing that any advisor will sell is that which they know and you don't. If all they're doing is doing what you ask them to do without first testing that is the correct area of expertise, the right question, know where you're starting from, know where you want to go, you've got all sorts of other problems building up, particularly if it goes horribly wrong. Most firms do not want to give advice. Why? Advice equals liability. And when you read their terms of business, they're just acting under your instruction. The question you've got to ask is, am I in a position to give that advisor an instruction, or what am I really going there for? It's their knowledge and experience. So really important that you disclose all the facts, work with somebody who's prepared to talk to you at no charge for an hour or so, to understand you and wants to build that long-term relationship with you. The other point you touched on was what's known in the trade as alphabet shares.
Okay. So, I've not heard of that phrase before.
Yeah, well, you can have share classes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on.
Yeah, okay.
So even if you've got two shareholders, they can both have the same rights, but one can have class A and one can have class B, but again with the same rights. Typically, you're going to use non-voting rights for kids who are either not yet in their majority, over the age of 18, or you've got doubt as to how they might lead their lives, or who they might marry, or whether there's divorce. So you can use classes of shares, which will allow you to pay a dividend, but don't give them any rights if their estate comes under attack. So all sorts of ways of doing it.
Lots of ways of doing it. And then of course you get into the will planning and trusts on death as well, which is another way of protecting it, isn't it?
Oh look, you have to do it. Everyone's going to die. If you're not, let me know. Like, be your agent. Usual terms and conditions apply.
Let's try and be positive, Tony.
I get my Grim Reaper statue out now. Yeah. Hey man, and without an alternative frame of reference, yeah, we don't know.
No. Got to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Exactly.
Plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Exactly. So look, regardless of how old you are, it's really important that you put in place a will that deals with your assets. Try not to appoint the professional firm as your executors. It's where the term goodwill comes from. A sister was selling his or her practice, and it's how many good wills do you have, my man? The goodwill being one where you've been appointed as the executor who can charge all sorts of fees. Yeah, it's far best to have people you know and trust who understand you as executors, and they can always go and get advice on specific matters. What is really important, even more than the will, is having a lasting power of attorney for your property and financial affairs.
Yeah.
Because you may not be quite dead, but may not be quite alive either. You could be out of the country. You could have broken your arm, been hit by the proverbial bus. And if you've got somebody running your properties, say, how are they going to keep managing it? Or if you've got any form of discretionary fund management, how are they going to keep managing it if you haven't legally appointed somebody to speak and act on your behalf if you're physically or mentally incapable of doing so yourself?
Very good point. Very good point. And it'll just tie up your estate for many, many, many months or years, won't it? As the
the Office of the Public Guardian used to be known as the Masters of Lunacy, and they still bring the tea trolley around. It is a classic bureaucracy. They will appoint a deputy in due course, and that deputy has got no personal interest in you whatsoever. No. Spouses don't have an automatic right, so always appoint somebody you know and trust and understands you to act as your attorney and executor. Whatever you do, don't do it yourself. Seek advice.
Definitely, definitely.
Have to pay for.
And I think, thanks to Craig, that's all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to say your whinge in there. Appreciate your very experienced. Thank you for that. 30 years in the industry, Craig D says thanks for the clarity on that sort of topic. But yeah, we're saying get these things on your radar. Things Tony's just discussed about lasting power of attorney and wills and all that stuff. If you haven't got one, you're absolutely mad. You need to go and get one sorted. Reach out to Tony to do that. If you want to reach out to Tony, I'm putting a slide up now on screen for you. Ping an email to tony@tonygimple.com. Say you've seen him on the webinar and you'd like to have a further discussion. He can put you in touch with the right members of his team to go and help you and get you going on your wills, estate planning, your tax advice, your incorporation advice, your LLP advice, and actually just look at your personal circumstances and tailor an option for you. What I'd like to do now, if I may, Tony, is ping up. I want to talk about the pros and cons of each option. So, what are the pros of a limited company? Let's go with that.
Okay. Pros of a limited company is you can deduct all of your finance expenses. So pretty much all of the expenses run through the business, they're deductible, and effectively reduce your profit for corporation tax.
Yep. Good one. Big one. So negates Section 24 ultimately.
Effectively Section 24.
Yeah.
Although it's not beyond the wit of man that at some point the government decide, we're now going to change the rules for limited companies who own investment properties, i.e. they're just collecting rents for 12 months or more. Right? And they could easily introduce a differential rate of corporation tax. So there are many ways that the government could sucker you into one solution, and then once you're in, jump all over you by changing the rules. There is, once you're established, the potential of limited liability on the mortgage side without personal guarantees, but you're going to have to be really established. The big downside with limited companies is how do you get your money out? You could have multiple layers of taxation. On the one hand, you can deduct all the finance costs. On the other hand, you've got corporation tax, income tax, employers' national insurance, employees' national insurance, potential
Dividend tax.
directors' loan account, auto enrolment, inheritance tax. So there are a whole range of issues associated with limited companies. If, however, you're trading in property, all right, whilst you've still got difficulties getting the money out, trading companies qualify for what's called business relief, business property relief. So it saves breaking up the business upon death.
Yeah.
Owning in properties in your own name, you've still got income tax issues. You've got to pay tax, clearly, but now effectively you're taxed on turnover as opposed to profit. You've still got the same issue with inheritance tax. It's within your estate. Although it can be easier, to get mortgages sometimes. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. The one thing that I've seen work best is mixed partnerships. And as long as you're not wholly or predominantly motivated to gain a tax advantage, but are looking to build, grow and run a professional property business, with buy-to-lets, then the mixed partnerships work very, very well. You don't have to remortgage, so no stamp duty, no capital gains tax. You've got the advantage of being effectively able to use all of the equity in the portfolio as a return of capital, so you won't pay tax on that. You've got the different shareholdings, within the limited company, so you can keep things in the bloodline. Based on things as they stand today, as with any option, that will also qualify for business property relief, typically after 2 years. And if you're really worried about it, you can always buy a bit of life insurance in the short term, regardless of which one you go for. So there are pros and cons on both sides.
Definitely.
There is no one side fits all. But whatever you do, don't go off and just jump. Make sure the firm you talk to understands you understand them, and has got all the constituent parts under the one roof: tax advice, accountancy, legal advice, financial planning, and can bring it together for the long term. What you want is in effect a non-exec advisory board, a power team, I believe they call it, within your business to help you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. No, good point. Let's go to a couple of questions that are sort of relevant now. Some of the pre-registered questions here, we've got let's go for this one. How do you transfer existing properties to a limited company? That's from Simon Lang. Thank you, Simon, for your question. And before you answer that, Tony, again, keep whacking questions. We've not had any questions in the chat for a little while. We've got plenty of people online, 40, 50 people on YouTube and others on Facebook and Facebook groups. So please keep posting in the chat, guys. We're here to help you. Any questions you've got, we'll try and cover them in the round without giving you specific advice, but we'll be able to give you an idea of some of the options or scenarios that are out there, and then it's for you to go and get the right advice on your situation to go and implement some of those. Don't just go and do things.
Been on air. I've had about half a dozen connection requests on LinkedIn already.
Jolly good, jolly good. I'm glad the webinar's working for you, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely.
We only charge 100% commission. No, joking aside,
so what was that question about putting it into a limited company?
Yeah, so the question from Simon that I was getting around to there really was just, how do you transfer existing properties into a limited company? And I'd like to start on that, if I may, by saying that's not necessarily the right route, Simon. So be very cautious that you're looking for a route to incorporate. Incorporation isn't always the right way. Potentially, like Tony's touched upon, depending on your business structure, if there's a viable business reason to do it, you potentially could be looking at mixed partnership routes, could be useful there. So over to you, Tony. How do you move existing properties into a limited company? That's a question you can answer, but again, covering that off by saying it might not be the best thing to do, of course.
Well, okay, you're right. I mean, it depends on where you are now and what you're trying to achieve. But on the assumption that there is the right solution, without knowing you and all of the details, typically you'll go through a partnership process first in order to be able to claim what's called Section 162 Incorporation relief. And that means you can transfer the properties in, say after 2 years, without incurring stamp duty. Capital gains tax is effectively held over to a future point, but you will have to remortgage. Because assuming you have mortgages on the properties, property moves from your name into a new legal personality, XYZ Limited. Some mortgage lenders might let you port the mortgage in, but others say, no, terribly sorry, you're going to have to settle up, remortgage. So interest rates may be higher, loan to values may be lower, and on the surface, you may not be better off in the process.
No.
But it is doable. Devil's in the detail once more, and it's understanding where you are, how far down the line, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and on the subject of lending, actually, Dr. Chong asked a little bit earlier in the webinar. I was looking for the right moment to put up these questions, but he says, "Am I right in saying there isn't any lenders which are happy to finance an SPV with a holding company shareholder?" No, that's not correct. I use holding companies and SPVs below it, and there are plenty of lenders out there that do it. Some lenders have an issue with more than a 2-tier structure. So in one of our sites, we've got a 4-tier structure on our main red brick business. And that's because we have our private companies, we have a management company, we have the main holding company, which does all the lending, and then the SPVs. They didn't like that. So for one site, we had to cut it down to a 2-tier structure that they were happy with. But a good number of lenders are getting to grips with this now, aren't they, Tony? I mean, you're not an IFA, clearly, but in your experience, you're seeing many issues with a proper corporate structure like that?
Again, it depends on the lender. Yes, there can be holding companies, but ultimately, the lender wants to know that they can pursue the debt, that they can get their money back. If you default, or the company defaults, or the trust defaults, or the SPV defaults, they want to make sure that they have got perfected security. I mean, the other thing with using limited companies is you effectively become a commercial client. You're really taking commercial loans. And that's a whole different ball game from buying in your own name. So if that is the right route, make sure you've done the what ifs so that you can demonstrate to a lender that you know what you're doing, you've covered the bases, and if there is another COVID-19 or whatever else, you can cover the payments and they can get their money back with a good margin. And sometimes you move away from the more traditional lenders and go for proper corporate banking facilities, merchant bank time, who will give you a rolling facility. But you need to be of size and that's track record.
That's harder than people think, I can assure you, and they still look at LTVs. That's great if you've got a big portfolio with extremely low gearing and you're then looking to go and grow, big cash investors, but starting out and smaller investors, even at our level of sort of a 30 million portfolio owned, we've built over 45 million pounds worth of property, we would still struggle with that, and that's how big you need to be, or you need to be, cash owners of a number of properties, then you can use this revolving facility. But it does work, it's an option. Yeah. Let's move on. I've got some questions from Dorps. Sorry for not answering them sooner. This one is a long one. If you're using a limited company to purchase property and intend to let it out, what are the advantages of purchasing in one limited company, an SPV, but having another limited company to collect the rent?
Depends on your personal situation and where, tax rates and so on. I mean, you can own in one, collect the rents in the other, almost like a bit like the mixed partnership. You can own the debt in your own name, and there's no reason why the LLP couldn't collect the rents.
Or another limited company in this question.
Exactly, yeah. So it's effectively the same principle. what you've got to be careful of is management. You know, if you're just using that as a way to charge a greater than market value management charge, in order to reduce tax somewhere else, that kind of thing is picked up. So it's down to the motivation. Why are you trying to do it?
Yeah, you've got to have, with everything, anything in tax has got to have genuine business reasons and often documented reasons. We're talking minute meetings from years ago when you made the decision to implement in a certain structure, certain advice from your accountants and tax advisors, solicitors, and that all has to hang together. That's what HMRC would look at, wouldn't they? They'd look at what were your intentions of doing this. Were you trying to avoid your tax, or were you carrying on the normal course of business, and in order to grow you needed this certain structure to be able to facilitate extra lending or whatever it might be. You've got to have good reasons for a lot of this stuff. So but we could call that a loophole, couldn't you, Tony? People might argue that's a loophole.
Loopholes get closed eventually.
They do. They do.
There was one years ago called the SARC lark.
The SARC lark?
The SARC lark. Basically, There are no taxes on SARC. And people were setting up all sorts of shell companies in order to gain massive tax advantages. And there was no other motivation other than don't pay any tax at all. Eventually, the government got a bit fed up with it, and they closed it down. So try not to go for loopholes. There are some areas where just because HMRC aren't looking doesn't mean to say that they won't look. It's like sometimes when people ask, have there been any investigations? And can you show me proof that HMRC approved what you were doing? Well, even if you're new to the letter that comes back from HMRC, just because they approve something for one particular set of circumstances doesn't mean to say that they'll approve it for another. But as long as your advisors are acting within the rules, and they've got the professional indemnity insurance, and they've got the tax investigation insurance, and more importantly, they've got a track record of doing so, then take their advice and go with it. What was that other saying? It's that the system is like a cow, and to keep a cow healthy, you have to milk it every day. Well, to mix my metaphors, it's also a bit like cricket. Soft hands and a straight bat. I mean, bear in mind with COVID, the government, the state protection racket, as I'm fond of saying, has put its hands very deeply in its pocket. And that may mean either taxes rise, or, depends how one nation Tory they really are, actually they start to reduce taxes, really stimulate the economy. Bear in mind, the higher the tax rates, the more people try not to pay. The lower the tax rate, more people pay. More money comes into the exchequer, and more money there is to spend. So try to avoid the loopholes, keep within the law, and the most important factor with all of this is, can you sleep at night? And if it's going to keep you awake, don't do it. It's not worth it.
Definitely. It's interesting, isn't it? As there's also this kind of scenario where as you grow as an investor, you've got a handful of properties and you're kind of, starting out, you've got one or two investment properties. It's a lot harder to spend significant money on advice, isn't it? I mean, part of the problem with starting out is it's quite expensive. And I remember when we were starting out and we had, multiple, things we wanted to do, and we started off with fairly bad tax advisors. I don't mind, not our recent accountants, they're very, very good. We've just sort of grown into a more property specific areas we've grown, but one of our first accountants was terrible, and they might have been able to file you a year-end return, and they did that badly. So you have to grow your advisors with time. I think that's critical, or get the right advisors in the first place, and pay for it, because it's money well spent. We've made plenty of mistakes where we've gone and had the wrong structure. I mean, Tony, you're helping us out with our structure and reorganisation of a few of our properties that are being moved into a structure that were bought in personal names before Section 24 came in. So we're implementing a sort of a partly mixed partnership structure in our big group. I won't go into the granular detail now, but ultimately, we've been able to pay for better advice over the years as well, and that's always a tricky thing, starting out. But I wish I'd paid for the advice sooner rather than just paying someone £500 to £700 for my yearly tax return in the first few years. The mistakes we made have cost us way more than the advice would have cost. Do you know what I mean? It's a tricky one.
Yeah. And also the other thing is, it's very easy to minimise your tax, only to find out I can't get a mortgage.
Well, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Financing critical.
Exactly the same subject. Yeah, they were paying almost nothing in tax. Suddenly they want to expand. Oh, I haven't got enough income. Whoops. No.
Fun and games. Right, we've kind of touched upon interest rates there, so I wanted to cover that. Was in our agenda, yeah. Tax rises and stuff. So kind of go back to Dorps. Dorps has just got a follow-up question that I want to ask here. Regarding separate limited companies for ownership and income, that was the two companies he was asking about. He also had in mind separating potential liability issues should an adverse event occur regarding the tenant. So I think what he's saying is separate the asset into one SPV and the tenants would be contracted to another company, thus couldn't, I guess, sue the company for something. So it's more of a legal question than an accounting question. That was his thinking, wasn't it?
Yeah, that okay.
It's got legs, hasn't it? I mean, if you, what I would say is if you're running, I'm answering the right question, thankfully. If you are, so I'm waffling, I'm trying to put questions up on screen and answer the question at the same time. Ultimately, if you've got a big tenant and your fire alarm breaks and you don't fix it for 2 weeks and they burn to death, a horrible, worst case scenario that landlords fear, then you're liable, But I would say if you run a tight ship, I wouldn't worry about that liability personally. That's the bottom line is, there is some liability there maybe, but you know what? If you're the director of both companies and it's leased to your company anyway, if there's a police investigation and a criminal action as to who's caused this tenant to die in a fire, it's going to come back to you anyway as the director of both companies, because you're a director of both companies. You wouldn't be necessarily the shareholder. So actually, I don't think the liability, again, this would be a specific question to check with your lawyer, Dorps, 100%. I'm not giving you legal advice, but my understanding as an experienced investor and developer would be that if you're the director of both companies, the liability is with you anyway, and even if one company owns the other, it's going to find its way back up to you for those kind of criminal proceedings.
Yeah, and directors have an unlimited personal liability for certain things: criminal action, corporate negligence, harassment, unfair dismissal, and so on. So the way to treat it is, if you had to live in that accommodation yourself, what kind of landlord would you want to have? Even if it's something from a halfway house, to a high-end HMO on Millionaires Row, given your circumstances, what would you rather have? The landlord who takes it seriously, isn't trying to avoid their human responsibilities, forget the legal stuff, it's about being a fellow human being, and providing somebody with appropriate, decent, safe accommodation, or somebody who's trying to put layers and layers in, just to avoid mending the fire alarm. So it's more of a moral point than a tax or a legal point. Just do it properly.
Yeah, do it properly in the first place, and you won't have to worry. And I'm sure you do, Dorps. It's just, that liability. If you're a director, it's going to come back to you. Exactly. If it's a financial thing, generally tenants owe you money, not the other way around. So again, I can't see any major financial liability to a tenant. That's unlikely, isn't it, Tony? I've not seen many of those. But yeah, let's go back to tax, Tony. I've got some questions here. We've got a couple of really interesting ones. Thanks for being patient, anyone that is posting them. Keep posting them. We will get to them. If it's not immediate, I'll try and slot them in at the relevant time, wherever possible. Also, I actually haven't mentioned really on this podcast that I do mentoring, one-to-one mentoring of people. And, you know, part of that mentoring is to help you get give you general advice on your business structure for your business side. I then refer you over to someone like Tony to go and implement that stuff and take the formal advice. So my mentoring, I cover all sorts of stuff. I cover what we do in our companies, all that corporate structure, and the reasons and the pros and cons of a lot of these things. It's not tax advice, it's just what the options are, and then you need to go and get formal advice off the back of that kind of stuff. I can help you with introducing you to my black book, my network of people. Tony is one of those people. We have great financial advisors to get you those kind of lendings. There was a question a moment ago about can you get lending if the property's owned in a 2-tier SPV? Answer is yes. I can get you in touch with the right brokers that will find that kind of stuff. A lot of brokers don't realise it's out there or don't have the experience or in-depth knowledge to see it. But I can help you with HMOs, I can help you with commercial to residential conversions. I can help you with laying out your floor plans. I can help you with private lending. We lend over £5 million from private investors. If you want to learn how to do that, have the business structures in place, I can help you with all that kind of stuff. So back to tax, just wanted to know what I do really there for people, because it is kind of helpful. If people are stuck on stuff, want to take it further, we can get them to the next level and get them going and growing quicker. The question I wanted to bring in here was from Johan Nielsen. Thank you, Johan. Sorry it took a while to get to it, but he wants to touch briefly on options for keeping the property by selling the existing home into one's own property business and making it an investment. So, what he's saying is
his principal private residence.
Yeah, I think he wants to keep his principal private residence and let it out, put that into a company, and then go and buy another house. So he's what would you call that? There's a phrase for it. I've forgotten it now.
Rentvestor.
It's live to rent or something like that, isn't it? There's a phrase for it. Anyway, good question. What you are going to miss out on, which I've done exactly this recently, to be honest. And you've got to weigh up the tax, the SDLT loss, haven't you, Tony? Because the new house that you're going to buy, you're going to pay your surcharge on that ultimately.
Effectively, because whilst you're taking a new principal private residence, and stamp duty is really complex.
Yeah, it's more complex than people realise, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Stamp duty is not my expertise by any stretch of the imagination, and it's highly complex, and try to stay away from any stamp duty avoidance schemes.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on this one, when we moved house, it was 2 years ago, we had to pay the surcharge on the second residential property, and I think we had 3 years to reclaim that 3% if we sold the first the original property. Yeah. So, but if you're not going to do that, Johan, and then you are missing out on that 3% surcharge. You're going to pay that on the next property, and you won't be able to claim back if you're keeping it. Now, I'm keeping my one. It's worth it. I've turned it into a 9-bed HMO. It makes £5,000 a month income. The mortgage is only 1,100 quid. The bills are 500 or 600 quid. So I'm netting over £3,500 on that one property alone. So that offsets the 3% stamp duty. The property I bought was just under 2 million, including stamp. So it was a hefty 3%, I can assure you, for my private residence. And unfortunately, that's money down the pan to good old HMRC. But that is the nature of it. And I'm earning £3,500 a month, hopefully the rest of the time, net profit in that company the property that I kept. And actually, that income from that property, Tony, that I kept, that Johan's suggesting keeps this, buys another one, that income funds my new residential mortgage. So I've moved house to a bigger property for no mortgage. I've reduced my mortgage, interestingly. So because I was paying a mortgage on the first house, obviously, and now that house not only covers its own mortgage, it now pays my new house's mortgage. So I think it's a great thing to do. I forgot what the question was. It's up on screen. Options for keeping the property. So I guess he can incorporate it. He can move it, maybe into a mixed partnership.
there's all sorts of things that he can do, but it depends on where he is now, how many other properties, is it his first one? So the thing you want to avoid is living in the property when it's owned by the limited company and it's your limited company.
Yeah.
That brings all sorts of horrors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also got to be careful sometimes with inheritance tax, pre-owned asset tax, gift with reservation of benefit. There are all sorts of complex stuff that go with the question. But if it's the right thing for him to do, it is possible. Yeah, and as you said,
there are options, aren't there?
There are options.
There are options as to get that incorporated, or keep it as your personal name. If you're only going to keep those two properties, you can have the lower rates of Section 24 tax, can't you, Tony? Tony, can you remind me, because it's not something that I get hit by, but if let's say you only own 2 buy-to-lets and your own home, what effect does Section 24 on that sort of smaller investor?
It's less about the number of properties. It's about whether the rents are going to push you into higher rate tax.
Okay, so it's more about the income from the. Wasn't there a cut-off at like 6 properties or lower?
No, that's being a portfolio landlord. The definition of a portfolio landlord for FCA mortgage purposes is 4 or more properties over and above your principal private residence.
Yeah.
And then you've got to start having business plans. Lenders are going to see a lot more detail, and so on. But it's not so much the number of properties; it's where you and your spouse or civil partner are for tax purposes. And as long as you're both, after all rents and other incomes below basic rate, then Section 24 you get the maximum relief available. But the minute you go over that, that's when you start to need to look at other solutions. And you can also, I was speaking to somebody the other day, his wife's very, very successful high rate taxpayer. He's in a bit of property development, hasn't done much obviously, during the COVID thing. He's well below higher rate. So they use a Form 17. So effectively he gets 99% of the income, she gets 1. So they're still saying basic rate tax. There are all sorts of ways to skin that cat. You're just going to make sure it's a cat in the first place and whether or not it actually wants skinning. So it depends who you are, where you are, onshore, offshore, domicile for tax, resident, and so on.
Okay. And again, if you've got solutions, haven't you, Tony, for helping people with this advice, whether it's incorporation or whether it's creating a mixed partnership. We've heard your phone buzzing in the background there, actually. I don't know if you can flick it on silent for us, but we're all paying attention to that.
All over the bloody house, so. No, my wife being the proverbial sun goddess, was probably outside in the garden sunning herself. Yeah.
What are you doing up there? Stop work, it's a lovely day. Come down for a gin and tonic.
Oh, don't. Is the sun over the yard arm? Yeah. Absolutely, somewhere in the world. Yeah. Jack Daniels is my particular tipple. One thing we also need to touch on, if we haven't bored people to death already, is we've talked about SPVs and third-party investors. Really important that you understand their circumstances. How are you going to repay the investments? Yeah. What happens if they fall under the bus, whether they survive or not? So having the right shareholder agreements, partnership agreements, understanding who their beneficiaries or attorneys are, is going to be key. So always do your due diligence on the investors and make sure they have the right structures and estate planning in place, and they should do the same with the people they're investing in. And by the way, SPV is just a marketing term for yet another limited company. That's what an SPV is. They say special purpose.
It's just a limited company usually, isn't it?
It's a company.
It could be you could describe an SPV, an LLP could be an SPV.
Yeah,
it just means special purpose vehicle. It just means an entity for a purpose, doesn't it? It's a very generic term.
Exactly.
So,
and they don't have to be necessarily part of the mainstream arrangements. You can have corporate shareholders there. There are all sorts of arrangements to reduce liability, but still get the benefits.
a couple of really quick questions that we can answer here. Jason Cornock has asked, if I purchase a property in cash and want to remortgage as a buy-to-let, would I have to pay SDLT again? Well, no is the answer to that. Not unless you are incorporating it or selling it to your own company, in which case there may be ways to not pay SDLT there as well if the ownership structure is the same. You need to take advice on that. But if you're just remortgaging an existing property, there's no SDLT, there's no change of ownership, it's just a mortgage. So that's a nice quick one. Helen Akangba, who has been on before, thank you Helen, keep the questions coming. Anyone else that's there, we've been dipping around 40, 50 people online, some people are coming, some people are going. We've got a good crowd on here, keep the questions coming and we will get to them. If we're here all evening, Tony, hope you haven't got any dinner plans.
Lunch would be nice.
No chance of that.
I'll start having a Joan Collins moment soon.
Yeah. Helen has asked, I'm going to answer this one direct because this is right up my street, but Helen's asking, are HMOs value for money now, I guess more value for money now than single family lets? Well, I think the answer to that is about yield. It's about risk. Again, not wishing to give specific advice. It depends on your own circumstances as to your risk profile as well. An HMO, I believe HMOs, if they're in the good area with good demand from tenants, are far less risky than a single let. If you've got a 6-bed HMO with 6 independent tenants, all with different jobs and different scenarios, if 1 or 2 of those gets made redundant or laid off or whatever it might be, or you replace them or they move out, you're still covering your mortgage and all your bills. This isn't a particular tax question, but ultimately you can get a much higher yield, a much higher income from HMOs. It's a little bit more management, but don't be put off by that. It's a little bit more regulation, but don't be put off by that. As long as you go high end and build everything to the best possible spec, you've got nothing to worry about. But ultimately, getting 6 good quality bedrooms, I use some areas like we're in Reading, we're in Newbury, Andover, Basingstoke, all these surrounding areas. 6-bed house, let's say 300 grand. I can get comfortably 6 people in there, 6 double bedrooms, good communal areas, nice garden. We're getting almost up to £600 a room in that. So, 6 is 36, £3,600 a month. That same single let will be costing you maybe 12 or 13, will be earning you 12 or 1300 pounds a month as a single family home. So, drastic amount of income available from HMOs. Tony, what do you think about supply and demand imbalance at the moment? But for me, there's a massive, supply demand imbalance, has been for years. It's getting worse. COVID would have made it worse, right?
Demand exceeds supply across a margin. Yeah. HMOs are very, very good. Some of them can be only half tenanted and you're still making a profit.
Still covering your rent and your bills and making a profit.
Yeah. The key is look for where you can get the occupancy rate. Make sure you work with the local authority. Not all of them, understand their role in life. So get the licenses in place, do it to the right standard, and you shouldn't have a problem.
No, definitely.
Yeah. Family lets. Again, depends on the area, depends on what you're trying to achieve. In the northeast, there are sadly still quite a few people on universal credit. A lot of single mums who are only too happy to have a house done up to a good standard. Sad to say that may be their only opportunity because they'll never ever be able to buy. But they want somewhere safe and clean to raise their kids without being in an HMO. So
of course.
It's not all about the money. The money is important, clearly, but it shouldn't be imperative.
Well, I think we're talking about investors. We're not talking about what certain tenant groups and what they need. There's plenty of different tenant groups that need property.
Oh, yeah.
I think if people are starting a property strategy, should they look at HMOs versus single lets? I think absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
that's the straight answer, isn't it?
But look at all of the options.
Of course.
HMOs, single lets, shared. I mean, there's all sorts of things to look at. The key is, what are you trying to achieve? What's your motivation?
Yeah.
Why are you doing it in the first place?
I mean, do you want to resell it quickly, or do you want to hold it for a long term?
Yeah, and whatever you go for, tenants and toilets are hard work. There's no
Definitely.
getting away from that.
I like to have my HMOs in quite a close proximity, within an hour or two's drive, because the management of them is a bit more intensive. Even if you've got managing agents or staff, we've got staff now that in our team that are excellent staff that manage these things for us. But you still need to be near, you still need to nip in on these things and do monthly visits and keep an eye on stuff yourself. Don't relinquish too much control. But if anyone's interested in HMOs, that's a big area that I specialise in. If someone needs help getting into HMOs, learning about them, helping with layouts, learning how to finance them, learning the best ones to go for, sourcing them, give me a shout. I'm keen to work with you. Right, Tony, let's get on to some more questions here. We've got lots of cool questions coming in, so let's get through them as much as we can. Here we go. We're going to get on in a moment to succession planning and estate planning.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave that question, but it's a good question about mitigating inheritance tax. Well, let's just go for it. They come up. Stephen Salinger, any advice about mitigating inheritance tax on a family-owned limited company resi portfolio worth 10 million, no debt? Great. I'd say go and get some debt, Stephen, and you can lend it to our company, Red Brick, for a significantly great double-digit return.
And that was a word from our sponsor.
I'm serious, actually, but no joke. Inheritance tax, I think, is really the question, not whether you want to maximise your portfolio and earn great income whilst secured in UK property. Inheritance tax, Tony, give us a blurb on that. What would you do there?
Spend it. Have some fun. Look, it's always better to deal with inheritance during your life than wait till death. If you start to give it away during your lifetime, good. At least you get that, warm, cuddly feeling of the kids saying thank you, whilst you can still experience it.
Yeah.
Once you're dead, that's it. That alternative frame of reference. So how can you deal with inheritance tax? If they're already in the limited company, you may start to give away shares up to the value of your CGT allowance every year. You might want to take out life insurance, to cover the liability.
Well, there's no debt on this one, so I think that's less risky, but still have a policy, of course.
The fact there's no debt, actually, and it's 10 million effectively net asset value of rental properties. That's going to be, and assuming that, so you've already used up your personal allowances on your own home and the rest of it, at current rate, that's 4 million quid. Somebody's going to have to pay. That is a huge sum of money.
Oh, you got a cup of tea? Can I have a cup of tea from your wife, Tony?
Yeah, thanks.
Can she make me one?
If we can work out how to do that and get the transport, to site transport. Yeah, hey ho.
Geez, where's my cup of tea? I have to ask my wife to bring me one. I feel jealous. I've got a glass of water.
Well, yeah. You're probably going to be healthier than I am, but yeah, I need the tea. Okay.
So 4 million tax to pay ultimately.
Just on that chunk alone, assuming you've used up your nil rate bands elsewhere, it's very difficult to get around inheritance tax. Yeah. Probably needs a lot more detail to look into it. Yeah, and what you can do over time to mitigate it. Yeah, so you've got to be careful what other gifts you've made, who are the shareholders, good on. I mean, but life insurance is a good way of dealing with it. Only trouble is it will probably never keep up with market value. And then you've got the thing is age, are you insurable, what's your health like? Rearrange this well-known phrase will work.
Now I'm chatting to my live stream customers whilst you're waffling on about inheritance tax. They're saying stick to the water, Nick, it's healthier.
I come from long-lived peasant stock. Most of them, survived well into the mid-90s. I think one of my aunts gave up smoking in the mid-90s and then had the bad manners to die. So, I mean, hey, man, as I'm fond of saying, sex and drugs and rock and roll are much underrated.
Keep these questions coming, guys. Craig D's asking, how about putting the shares into a trust?
Yeah, potentially that could be done. Trusts have their advantages and disadvantages.
I'm looking at a trust at the moment with you guys, aren't we? So,
well, there are trusts and trusts, and part of I shall wear it always.
Okay, give us some options.
Okay.
Not advice, options.
Options. Yes, potentially you've got a discretionary trust for the shares. Potentially you've got freezer shares. Almost certainly you're going to need some pretty expensive advice. It's not something you can do off your own back. It's highly specialist. And trust can be used, but there could be entry charges. There could be periodic charges. There could be exit charges. You've sure as hell got to trust your trustees. So it's not something I'm prepared to go into detail with now.
No, there's a lot to think about, but it's definitely an option.
Again, potentially, trusts are one of the options, part of the solution.
So if you, just to be clear, I'll ask you a question that it's popping into my head now. If you didn't do any inheritance tax planning, but you did set up a trust on your death, you wouldn't pay that 40%, that 4 million out of 10 million?
No, I mean, it depends what trust, on death, where it's situated. Is it part of your will? Is it an inter vivos trust? But potentially, you could offset that.
Yeah. Okay. So there are options to offset that in a trust structure as another alternative.
Yeah. If you're making a gift with reservation via a trust or not, you're effectively still enjoying the benefits of it. So it could be unwound.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You need to look at it in the round. It depends on the trust and the purposes and the rest of the estate and so on.
Jun C asked, back on a previous discussion there about, you were talking about the 99 to 1% ratio. He's, I assume it's a he, could be a she, Jun, sorry if I don't know if you're a he or a she. Why can't it be 100% to 0% rather than 99 to 1?
Good question.
That was on the split. So can you remind us what that topic was? That was on the split of share ownership in a limited company. Was that right?
No. That was on the property.
So on the property ownership.
On the property ownership.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So if one of you is a real high rate taxpayer,
okay, you're sharing the income, weren't you? That discussion. Yeah.
So I mean, the alternative, I suppose, you could give it to, the income to take none of the income at all. But again, let's have a look with what's behind the question. Yeah. If suddenly you're the owner of that property in your own name and giving it all to somebody else, why? It's just try not to push the envelope too far.
No.
But 417 effectively says you need, some in your name at least. Otherwise, you might as well put it in the whole property in somebody else's name, which may cause a problem with the mortgage in the first place. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. What do we got here? We've got long term. Okay, so thank you for your input, Dorps. We appreciate it. Give some good topic for discussion. Keep those questions coming in, guys. Anyone that is here watching on the live streams, whether you're in the Facebook groups, in the Facebook pages, on YouTube, do whack in your questions, keep them coming in. Do reach out to myself if you want any help with your mentoring, if you want me to give you any specific sessions on any specific issues, growing your portfolio, raising private finance, getting into HMOs, getting into commercial to residential conversions. We're doing 2 at the moment, one 32 unit scheme in Reading, another 42 unit scheme in Newbury. So we are rather experienced of doing commercial to residential conversions. We've got over 200 HMO and micro studio rooms in our portfolio. I can give you tours of those as part of the mentorship. Should be able to get you going. Tony, reach out to Tony if you want any of this advice that we're talking about, any of these scenarios. If you want your own personalised, you're going to have to pay for it, but it's extremely reasonable. It's going to save you hundreds of thousands, certainly tens of thousands over the years. Go and reach out to Tony at tonygimple.com. Tony at tonygimple.com. I can't say it. Blah, blah, blah. Tony Gimple.
At tonygimple.
Tony at tonygimple.com. It's up on screen so we can see that. But reach out, as we are stressing, this is all kind of advice, isn't it, for general options, some of the scenarios that are out there. And I think if people are watching, they're not going to go, oh, this is a great idea, I'll go and implement that, because actually you can see how complex it is. I think what we're demonstrating, Tony, as we get into some of this detail, is how detailed it is, some of it, and you don't know what you don't know. I always say this to people when I'm working with them on the one-to-one mentorships. You don't know what you don't know. Don't go and buy this thing because you're missing out this. You haven't looked at this. It's extremely important to you get all that advice, because you're going to trip yourself up, and we don't want you to trip yourself up. We're here at Property Forum. We're doing these seminars to help people for free, get you into it. Yes, we have our businesses and we can help you in other ways if you want it. There's no hard upsell. We're very ethical, and we are here purely to give you some good free advice and hopefully set you off on the right path with your portfolio and growing it. So we've got a question here about, so back to Dorp's question. His question earlier on growing via finance is aimed at what structure will theoretically allow more finance to be raised in the long term. I hold a number of properties currently, all with no debt. So if you're still listening, Dorps, how do you own those properties? Are they currently in a limited company? I can't remember what you said. Trying to read back over the questions. I'll answer that briefly from a business point of view, Tony, if I may. What structure will theoretically allow more finance to be raised long term? I guess there's lots of different finance, and when I do my mentoring, we go through a whole finance section, and it's not financial advice, it's not an IFA advice, it's when can you use these kind of finance, whether it's bridge loans, term loans, commercial mortgages, HMO mortgages, standard sort of buy-to-let mortgages, private investors, mezzanine finance, all that kind of stuff. Where and when do you use those kind of things? Ultimately, we have a structure that has, forgetting the higher tiers, which are just personal companies for efficient tax taking when we do eventually have to take that tax out of our limited company structure. Ultimately, we have a group company that has private lending to it, and then the SPVs are below them. And that scenario of a two-tier structure at least allows the sort of management and lending to be done here in a very safe, secure way. A lender can then, if we're talking about a private lender, we lend that down to each SPV. They have the portfolio of the SPVs where their money's secured, because they essentially own the balance sheet of the header company, which ultimately then owns all the individual SPVs below. So for a private investor, that's very secure lending in my view. We are only allowed to lend to high net worth and sophisticated investors. And if you are one of those and would like a completely hands-off, fully secured investment, we can help you with that, and we can show you our site, show what we do as developers. But ultimately, you can earn a lot. You can raise a lot of finance on that and use that money to go and build your sites and create a win-win relationship with investors, where you go and make money on your sites. You can repay your investors monthly, yearly, quarterly interest rate, and we have a notice period in our contracts, for example, which is like a 2-year rolling notice period. We need a reasonable time, because if we've got 2 or 3 big sites on the go, we need to be able to finish those, refinance them to be able to repay the investors' money, or sell them. That's our 2 exits. So there's plenty of exits, and ultimately, that allows really good finance raising, because we can raise some senior debt on the SPV level. You can raise maybe some commercial debt on this higher level, but we used private debt at that level, and that means that we can be very flexible. We can be quick to market. We can get stuff we can be really super quick to market buying stock, because we can use the investors' money as cash to quickly buy it, and then we'll refinance them onto a slightly lower rate at the end. And that blended interest rate of a high interest rate to investors and some senior debt at a much lower rate and a lower loan to value means we get a very sensible blended interest rate, which makes it highly efficient structure. Also, we touched upon it earlier, didn't we, Tony, about reinvesting. If you're reinvesting and growing massively, that corporate structure works really, really well. So again, it comes back to, I'll let you take over on this one, Tony, but it comes back to your individual circumstances. We're growing, we're building a massive portfolio that we probably won't sell and won't need to take a huge amount of income out of. It'll go into trust for our kids and intergenerational wealth.
Yeah. If you've got a completely unmortgaged portfolio, then debt being very, very cheap at the moment, as long as you're keeping the loan to values in check, then you should do really well. No more than 65, 70% loan to value. You've got a lot of margin now. Can you go higher than that? Only if you know you've got the exit route coming up. Because the last thing you want to do, is lose all your hard work. If it's going to be for long-term, buy-to-let HMO stuff, then do it on interest only. Your own home is different. Pay the damn thing off as quickly as you can, and then at least you've got a roof over your head. But if you've got a lot of equity, or 100% equity in this case, time to start looking at it to leverage that investment and make some more money. You could probably double or triple the size of your portfolio very easily. All right, that'll bring other problems.
Yeah.
But whether they're problems brought about with no money, problems brought about by too much money, the latter is probably the nicer problem to have.
Definitely. Dorps is saying it's almost all in a limited company, which is great. Yeah. A couple personally, so you might need to deal with those, some sort of tax structure on those couple, bring those into, a mixed partnership group or whatever. So I'd highly recommend you contact Tony on that basis to get those two sorted out, because you'll be getting hit, with Section 24 and whatnot if you refinance them. So the time to do it would be create the right structure, refinance those in the new structure. And that way you're set up ongoing and making the most tax efficient investments and use of that property equity, right?
Yeah, and then start to balance out to help deal with inheritance tax issues as well.
Yeah, exactly. That structure will help with both, won't it?
Yeah, over time. Yeah, so certainly worth a contact in due course. Let's have a look at the detail. Yeah, and if we can help you, or if what you're doing is perfectly okay on that side, we'll tell you either way.
Yeah. And he's saying he has a portfolio of 10 million, no debt, needs to raise finance to grow further. So, again, on the side, I'd say speak to Tony about structure and inheritance tax, and then financing. I can talk to you about the best way to finance that through a mentoring session or two, get you kind of the right finance at the right rates in that new structure, and then help you grow the portfolio potentially. I mean, you sound like a very experienced landlord, so I'm not going to be telling you to suck eggs, but we might be able to work together and grow a bit quicker, maybe get into HMOs, commercial to resi, who knows, but it'd be good to have a chat. If you book a free chat with me, by the way, guys, if anyone wants a free chat, I do an introductory taster call for the mentoring, so jump on nicholaswallwork.com/mentorship there. And it's not a pitch, it's purely here to help you guys. I'm happy to have a free call. I'd love to think that we might work together after it if you're happy with the way I work and you think I can help you. It's extremely, I believe it's money really well spent, and I make sure that when I'm mentoring people, they get extreme value for money. The cost of the mentorship should be a fraction of the money that I'll save you or make you with the advice I give you. And if you don't, I'll give you your money back. Absolutely. I'm not here to sell unethical, dodgy property education like a few people in the industry, Tony. And likewise, it's a good point to mention Property Summits. Tony and I are both on the Property Summits panel with some other leading experts in the property industry world. So head over to propertysummits.com. I wonder if one of my team can pop that in the chat there, please, and I can bring it up on screen. But propertysummits.com, great, educational seminars. We're doing some virtual seminars at the moment with the lockdown in place. We've got our first live one in January. Is it what date was it? What did we say, Tony?
28th of January.
28th of January, guys. Get that date in your diary. Further details, go to propertysummits.com. Thank you, Kelly, for putting that in the chat. Propertysummits.com there up on your screen. Head over to that website, register with us. We've got a database where we send out information when those events go live. It's a bit of a live stream like this, but with all five of us. Kate Faulkner from, very well-known BBC commentator and expert in the industry, chairs the show generally. We do have occasional guest chairs come on as well, depending on availability and such like. So really good event that, isn't it, Tony? Tell us from your perspective what people will learn on that one.
Oh, look, it's brilliant. If you just look at the video reviews we had from the physical event we did earlier this year at the Taj in London.
Yeah.
Everyone just loved it. And
everyone got a lot out of it, didn't they?
We just told it as it was. All right, there's a fee to come along, but it's modest. and there were CPD points available from London Landlord Association and iHouse at the time, and it's just straight talk. How
no upsells, no dodgy sales, just good quality education.
Exactly. But if you have a look at that, you'll see all the videos. You'll see what people say.
Yeah, we put the testimonials from a few people on the day up on the Property Forum YouTube. So if you're on our YouTube channel now watching this, just scroll down. You'll see stuff about property summits on there. You can see some of the opening chats. I think we put the opening debate on and the testimonials. And again, go to propertysummits.com and register, and then you'll get all that info as it comes out. Our next seminar, our next online one, is on the 15th of July.
Yep.
So about 3 and a bit weeks away. So
and Kate's hosting that one as well, I think.
Say again?
Kate Faulkner's hosting that one as well.
She is, I believe. Yeah, absolutely. So again, you're going to get, Richard Bush is on there, who's a crowdfunder. He runs a crowdfunding company, Crowdlords. You'll get some really insightful finance-related lending stuff from him. Highly interesting. Paul Mahoney is also on from Nova Financial. Again, a very experienced property investor, buy-to-let expert, IFA. So again, you'll get some really good knowledge from him. And we've got that old guy. What was his name, Tony? John someone.
John Howard?
John Howard, that was it. John Howard. Sorry, John, if you're watching, only joking. John Howard, very experienced developer, been developing for 175 years now, was it? 20 years. 20 years. 20 years, and he does similar to what we do, but he's been doing it longer, and he's an excellent chap. He brings the humour to the panel, which is why I'm able to have a few jokes without him present. I'll definitely forward him this video so he can see the banter. I've got a feeling he'll get me back on one of his podcasts in the next few weeks. Right, what do we got here? Dorpstorp says he's not too experienced, but has purchased a number over the last 5 years. Well, let's get your knowledge up. Let's get your specialities there between Tony and I. Hopefully we can get you to the next level. Be exciting. Helen's asked, Helen Ankerberg again, thank you, Helen, from Facebook, one of the Facebook watchers. Buying cheap properties in areas like Glasgow and Liverpool, are they good investment decisions? London and Essex are way too expensive to have reasonable profit. Well, not a tax question, but happy to answer a few random questions here. It's what we're here for. I can't give you sourcing advice on a chat like this, but all I would say is, whenever you're looking to, invest in an area, ultimately do your due diligence on the area. And when I'm teaching people on one of my mentorships how to source, they usually get it wrong. And I get the feeling that you're kind of looking at lots of deals, Helen, going, I've got to analyse all these deals. What's a good deal? And I think what's important is that you flip it on its head, and you really understand the strategy you want to go for, how much capital you've got to invest, getting the business structure in place first before you buy anything. And then you can find the towns that work for you, because let's say you're going for HMOs, you're going for an HMO strategy. I would have taught you all the finances on that and how to source the right properties at the right price with the right room rentals, etc., cost of refurbishment, all that covered in. And then you're laser focused on your areas. Does it even work in that area? Very quickly you'll be able to tell. We buy in the Thames Valley, and you might think it's expensive there, but we're getting great returns for the right HMOs, and sometimes they need to be slightly larger. So I need to get you to think bigger on those kind of things. But are those cheap areas good? They might be. They might be higher yielding. In my experience, some of those areas, Tony, they might be cheaper, but they're good high yielding, but they don't necessarily go up in value that much. I'm not saying Glasgow or Liverpool don't go up in value. I'm just saying some areas that might be cheaper to buy, generally up north, the capital appreciation is not as good. Whereas Thames Valley, London, South East, you've actually got some really good capital appreciation as well. So it's a bit of a balance, isn't it, across all those factors?
The trouble with capital appreciation is it's 100% sentiment based.
Yeah.
Really nothing to do with supply and demand. It's just what somebody thinks might happen. Whereas if you're looking for income yield, and maybe only 1 or 2% capital growth, but 10 to 14% income yield, then northeast, some place in the northwest, Glasgow, wherever, perfectly fine. And the big advantage, particularly once you're in the portfolio space, for going for income as opposed to capital growth is you can turn the income into capital, and you can spend it.
Yeah, you can reinvest
Cash
it.
register is ringing while you're sitting on the Caribbean beach or wherever else you like.
Yeah.
Whereas there are restrictions now to what you can take out of the portfolio to live on if that money's coming out of capital. As part of the changes to take some of the heat out of the sector. And so it's a balance.
Definitely a balance.
Find it, understand what it is you're trying to achieve and why. And speak to people like Nick or me, and I'm fond of saying sit in a darkened room with a bottle of scotch and a cold towel wrapped around your head and work out why the hell you're doing it. And if that all still stacks up, and if it's for capital or income or both, bingo. Now find the locations. But there was one chap I spoke to the other day, he's read 40 books on the subject and he's still done nothing. Wonderful, great. Knows everything, but no real life experience. So at some point, you've got to act. So don't let analysis paralysis get in the way too much. Otherwise, you'll never get started.
Absolutely, you've got to make. I've made plenty of mistakes and continue to make mistakes because you're always learning and pushing your boundaries. You're growing. You're trying different areas, and it's about how you overcome those mistakes that makes you successful. I believe it's one of the key factors of success as a general concept. It's not about getting this great deal or being lucky or finding the dream property or whatever it might be. It's about how you overcome the mistakes. That's what makes it. It's ongoing, consistent planning and work and putting the right structures in place. That gives you the best possible chance, doesn't it? It
does. Yeah, and doing the right thing as a fellow human being.
Dorps, I missed a question earlier. Sorry about that. Dorps. He's asking, if you own a property well in excess of inheritance tax thresholds and intend to live in it till death, how do you mitigate the large inheritance tax liability for the children, aside from life insurance? So personal residence, worth a lot of money. How do you protect that?
All right, so there's
options to protect that. No specific advice.
Sorry.
Say again, sorry? Tony, say again?
Oh, sorry, right, okay. So there's no inheritance tax between spouses and civil partners. So you can pass everything to your spouse or civil partner, free of IHT.
What about to children, though?
Well, hang on a second. I'm coming to that. Yeah?
Okay.
You've got each person's got something called the nil rate band. That's the amount you can give away to a third party other than the spouse or civil partner free of inheritance tax. In this case, it's 325,000. You've then got the main residence relief, which is now at its maximum, so that's 175,000. So that would give up to potentially £500,000 for a husband and wife to leave to the kids. Anything above that, you're effectively now looking at 40% on the balance. Can you give it away during your lifetime? Only if you haven't got a reserved benefit. Could you give the entire property to the kids during your lifetime and still live there? Yes. A, you've got to live 7 years, and B, you've got to pay a market rent, which will cause other problems. Plus the fact suddenly the kids now have got the property, so if they screw up, go into bankruptcy, get sued or something else, you can be out of a home. Not an easy one to solve. No magic bullet, I'm afraid.
No, I mean,
you can take a big chunk of money out of the property, get some debt, go and spend it. Start giving away money during your lifetime.
Yeah, and one route would be to finance that property as part of the other portfolio, get the debt on it, put it into a good corporate structure that's been designed for inheritance tax planning, and use it that way. Then you're not only growing your portfolio by getting sensible levels of good debt. I call good debt one that services itself and makes you profit, which is what property investment debt is all about.
Yep.
But then putting that money into good use and protecting your inheritance tax planning. That seems the answer for this one to me. Not we're giving advice, Tony, but on a practical sense, it would seem that this is the way.
But at the end of the day, you've got to make sure that if you're taking out the debt, you've got to look at the potential worst case scenario. What happens if that debt can't be repaid? So you, when it comes to your own home, you've got to be more than prudent. There are times in life, I've been the fool where the angel feared to tread, and I've still got some of the scars, and some of them are still weeping. Whether it's the guitar playing in the background or not, but it can be bloody hard at times. And look, when it comes to inheritance tax, yes, it's voluntary. But if you've ever been to any of my other presentations, you've probably heard this bit before. But we have our kids, feed them, clothe them, educate them, teach them everything they know. What more do they want? So have as much fun as you can during your lifetime, and start giving other liquid assets away to the kids to help them on their journey. And the rest of it, let's have a look at the detail.
Yeah, okay. I've got a couple of questions from pre-registered people here, which are kind of interesting. Let's have a look at these. So I'm not sure if you know the answer to this one, Tony. It's a tricky one from Kay Hallinan. Kay Hallinan. Thank you, Kay, for your question. I can't put it up on the screen because it's a pre-registered one. I'm not very good with these names, am I? I have to read them beforehand. But ultimately, she is asking, as a non-UK resident, can I set up a UK trust for my children, transferring half the property business into the trust? So it's a non-UK resident setting up a UK trust. I assume the properties are in the UK. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a lot of point, would there? Otherwise, you're just bringing money into the UK. So I'm assuming it's a portfolio based in the UK trust. Is that an option? I'm
going to take that one under advisement. It depends where she's domiciled, how the properties are owned. I'm going to take that one under advisement. So I'll pass on that one for now.
No, that's fair enough. I think I don't know the answer to that either. That is a very complex question. And there's a number of technicalities there. I think potentially the answer might be yes, but it's going to be complicated.
Without wanting to profile people, Hallinan, I'm guessing from the Republic of Ireland, or if she moved elsewhere, because the Republic of Ireland, there are a lot of particular, there's a closeness there. But anywhere else there could be some other complications, but need to look at it more.
Yeah, and especially as it's a property business, how is that existing business set up? Is it currently personally owned? Is it limited companies? That you've got to look at that whole structure first to even answer that question, haven't you? So it's a tricky question, but again, get in touch with Tony direct. He will work out the answer for you, but it's not something that can be asked without significant amount more information, unfortunately.
Correct.
So I think we're coming to the end of a few of these questions. Obviously, where are we at? We're an hour and a half, Tony. Are you ready for lunch yet? Should we wind up? If anyone's got any last questions, do fire them in the chat. Or failing that, contact Tony and myself direct.
I don't feel I've answered anything really specifically enough. For the people who have put questions in, but sadly, the nature of the beast is such. This is more about the background information. And to give you an idea of what's out there than very specific binding advice. So it's more opinion at this stage than anything else.
It's more kind of some of the options. But I think what we've shown, a lot of people jump on Facebook groups and the property forum and online forums and stuff like that, and they're asking these questions. Shall I incorporate this? And people jump on and go, yes, you should, and no, you shouldn't. And it's like I just get like shivers down my spine when I see those kind of conversations going on in the dread that these people aren't going to go and take some professional advice before they do these certain things. It's kind of scary. So I think it's I think we've highlighted the need for the advice, but also how the depth of detail that some of these questions come up with. There's not a reason why we're not answering very specific questions, but it has to be case by case because there's so many different options. It's tricky. Right, I think we've got a couple of questions here, but I think that we've covered them, Tony. To be honest, we're talking about how do I pass two properties onto my son's effectively from Mitul Patel. Again, it's kind of we've touched upon trusts, we've touched upon certain incorporation scenarios. I think we've answered that one. What's the best way to set up a property business from an inheritance tax perspective? From Roma Cherubim, thank you for the question, Roma. I think we've pretty much covered that again. Lots of different incorporation methods. Depends on your properties. It depends on what you're buying, how big you're going to go, holding, keeping. Depends if you've got kids, depends if you've got a wife. Lots of things. So I think we've covered off some of the potential options there. So that just leaves me to thank you, Tony, for coming on. Greatly appreciated. Do you want to just give us a little 1-minute overview about, I'll put your slide up, where everyone can go to see you and what you can offer them, I guess.
Okay, all right, thanks for that, Nick. It's been fun, actually. Okay, so what do? Have down-to-earth, honest conversations with people who want to talk to me. It may be at the end of that, I'll say to you, actually, you need to go away and think through what you want first, to reassess your priorities. Beyond that, we'll then look at how we can help you, should we help you, what the next stages are, what information you need, working out, is it for anything from simple accountancy all the way through to full-blown structural planning, for you, your family, and the next generations. So by all means, get in touch. Like Nick, I'll spend time with you, initial time at no cost. And once we get to know each other better, and looks like we can work together, have that open, honest relationship, and be very direct. And you can get, once we understand where the bodies are buried, so to speak, then we can start to put you, in touch with the right people within the network, to get the work done you need, from accountancy through to law, through to mentoring, through to acquisition. But it's very much working as an advice collective, with you and for you, to help you recognise and achieve your goals.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And I've been flicking up your LinkedIn profile there, so please connect with Tony on LinkedIn. Yeah. You've also got his email there. I think your website's under construction at the moment, isn't it, Tony? But yeah. Tony@tonygimple.com. You can hook up with him there and have that informal chat to see if he can help you.
Yeah, some books and videos coming in due course.
Absolutely, and we're going to be working on a tax one, aren't we? Which is great. Yep. So we're going to do this kind of stuff in a nice ebook, which we unfortunately can't give you the link to now. But if you jump on propertyforum.com, there's an education section with lots of free ebooks. It will appear there in the coming weeks. So just I've mentioned about my mentoring before I head off. What I do, my main product really. We're property developers. That's our main business. As an aside to that, I'm passionate about helping people in property and helping them not make some of the mistakes that they might make without some guidance. In the same way, the structure and tax side, Tony helps, and we introduce people regularly over to Tony. Ultimately, I can help with sourcing of those things. I can help you with the advice on the finance to take. I can help you with growing your portfolio more rapidly than on your own. I've got people that have got 300 properties coming to me wanting to get into commercial to residential conversions because they haven't done that before. So depends what you want to get into. If you're interested in the HMO market and be taught about that, if you want to learn about any area of property investment that you maybe don't have as much experience on. If you're an experienced investor or a newbie alike, I think I can get you going considerably faster with some mentoring. So I'd love to hear from you. We can have an informal free chat. If you think it's for you, then we can work on that going forward. I've put up the link there to the ebooks, propertyforum.com/educational ebooks. Also, jump online wherever books are sold. Investing in International Real Estate for Dummies. This is a cracking book, 300 pages. See how thick it is? It's got HMOs, it's got commercial to resi conversions, it's got buying at home or overseas, it's got lease options, rent to rent, serviced accommodation, holiday lets, JV finance, raising finance. It's got everything in it. I mean, it really is a book that, covers a huge amount of property investing. So jump on there. I'll put the link up on screen. Go and buy the book. It's the cheapest bit of property education you're ever going to find, ever, and it's published globally. So go and enjoy that. Please, I'd appreciate any comments on that or nice, lovely reviews on Amazon if you find it useful. So that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you again, Tony. Really appreciate you being on here. Really informative. We've had lots of positive comments online here from people that have joined us. Thank you ever so much for everyone that's been watching the show. Please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You will get further tips and alerts and pings when we put up useful educational content. Obviously, when we do these extra podcasts with lots of different guests, Property Summits will be live streamed, no doubt, on our channel as well as the Property Summits channels and everyone else's channels involved. So yeah, really just looking forward to connecting with you on other shows. So give us a shout. Without waffling and banging on unnecessarily, we've really enjoyed it today. Thanks for all your input, and see you again soon.